Yes, okay. Hello, I want to make a consideration. The consideration is this. Assume that in our churches the faithful will never be told that the German Episcopal Conference has translated the prophecy of Isaiah, the famous verse in the Old Testament. But the consideration is this. The German Episcopal Conference is not the Vatican. I mean, this is done. What it's doing, they must respond to the Vatican because the highest sphere is in Rome. How could they have the autonomy to do what they've done? That is, cancelling the prophecy. As I said before, possibly the regional episcopal conferences have more autonomy because the discourse is that they know that this can't be kept under control since the number of people who have access to the true information is increasing. I am not no one. My lectures will be seen by 4 million people. What I'm doing here is not that it's something debatable. Plural is plural. Do I explain myself? Alma is Alma. It's not interpretation. When in Hebrew the word arah appears, translated as, or used to be translated as, will conceive, che veniva tradotto con concepirà, ara non è neppure un verbo, è un aggettivo che significa incinta. This verb is actually an adjective meaning pregnant. Therefore, ala, ara. Make the participle in the present, parturient. Woman giving birth or having just done so. Therefore, a young parturient. Period. It's not interpretation. It is calm reading, normal, for everyone. But could we? No, we can't. Ara is an adjective, and one who is pregnant is one that has already conceived, logically. Hi, excuse me. Allow me to add a note for this. 4 million people have listened to your lectures. Now I'm gonna play devil's advocate. Yes, do the work of Satan. I'll do the work of Satan. How much damage can be done with this information? How much damage can Mauro Biglino do? If in 10 years 4 million people have listened to it, and let us assume that 90% believe what is said. But how much damage could be done if we confronted each other in public? Yes, but this is my question. After 20 years, 9 million people will have listened to you, and in 30, 40 years, 14 million people. How much damage has been done? None. It's okay like that. It's fine like that. We'll let it be. We'll let him talk. If we attack him, we give him visibility. Let's leave it. 50 million people will have heard it in 50 years. And there they will cite my mother. But there are 2 billion Christians. They're not worried about me at all. Luckily I have fun while doing it. There was this interview I made with you 2 years ago. I didn't remember until now. Better not to know the question before. Yes, better. The thing is, isn't it that maybe, since we are working on this change, this quickening that we're living, isn't it that maybe that there's a certain will of a certain part of the establishment? Yes. The question is hard. You gave me the answer and we uploaded it on YouTube. It's there on our website. And I remember the answer you gave me. If you remember it, I remember it perfectly. You said, That it's not so much the damage that is being done, but rather something is changing, and maybe I'm being a help to them. Exactly, no doubt, no doubt. Up to the point that people begin to hear these things that we have said, people can believe them or not, but they've started to listen to them. In ufological terms, it's called acclimatization, adaptation, yes. And after? What was the technique called by the FBI? Yes, it's specifically, it's a kind of mental conditioning. Not exactly that, but whenever it comes, it will come. The debate is that if a lie is revealed, they will say to us, as a matter of fact, we haven't intervened, and if a truth is revealed, they will say, we, in fact, have not intervened. Let us let him speak, let him say, and if something happens at the end, we have not intervened.
Lasciamo che dica, in qualsiasi modo noi alla fine diciamo di fatti non siamo intervenuti. Esattamente.
Mauro, there's another question. Hi, please. The Bible says that man is programmed to live for 120 years. And if it's true that Moses lived for 120 years and was called to the mountain and died, why does man not live for 120 years? Because that speech, in fact, has been made for the Adamites, not for the Homo sapiens.
Per gli Adamiti, non per l'Homo sapiens. Perché gli Adamiti, chissà se ce l'ho, no? Ho detto tuo collega perché parlate la stessa lingua, Francesco Guarnaschelli.
Because the Adamites were not the progenitors of humanity, but rather a special race that they created to work in their Gan Eden. And these, the Adamites, who had a lot of genes of the Elohim, actually lived around 800 to 900 years. So much to the point that in chapter 6 of the Genesis, it is said that the children of the Elohim saw that the sons of the Adamites were todo, meaning appetizing. Todo means that they adapted to, and that the reproduction has taken place in reality. Because then they were already females, and they took as many companions as they wanted and had children. These children in the Bible are called Kimborim, which has the same root as Kebe, Gabriel, which means powerful, strong. And they had children who were called Kimborim. This was an issue that shouldn't be known because the chief didn't want the Elohim to unite with the children of Adam. Then, at a certain point, it is when the Adamites began to multiply. Genesis 6, and started to disperse through the earth. The children of the Elohim found the daughters of men desirable and took as many women as they wanted. In the Hebrew text, it is written that they were taken when they were ready for marriage. That is, when they were particularly beautiful, well prepared, well washed, etc., etc., etc. Then the Elohim says, my spirit will not last. What he has contributed will not last forever in Adam, because he is made of flesh. His lifespan will be 120 years. Professor Kaval Surainam Salimi of the American University of Beirut, who comments on this passage and says that they decided to interrupt their contribution of genetic heritage after learning about the sexual encounters. And here, the life of the Adamites, reading the Bible from behind, it goes from 600, 500, 400, 300 to 100 years, because little by little the genetic patrimony of the Elohim was being lost. And here it says a beautiful thing. There were giants on earth at that time, and then after, when the sons of the Elohim slept with the daughters of men, and they gave birth to many sons. That is, crossbreeding. And here, there's a great sentence that could have been Homer's. These were the famous heroes of ancient times, demigods that have been spoken of, sons of one of them and one of them here, or vice versa. Gilgamesh was one of them. Achilles, heroes of ancient times. We could put this sentence into a Greek text without changing anything. Without changing anything. In fact, when we talk about the life of the Elohim, which was a very long one, it is spoken about in the Sumerian royal list. The Egyptian priest Manatone speaks about it. The Babylonian priest Beroso speaks about it. He said they would live between 30 and 40,000 years. Obviously, one says to oneself, because of course, 30,000 years? Okay, it's fine. On Earth, we have butterflies that live for 24 hours, and turtles that live for 200 years. They're made of the same DNA, the same chemistry. They have the same molecular structures. They live on the same planet and breathe the same air. Turtles live 70,000 times the life of a butterfly. If these would live for 30,000 years, they would live only 500 times the duration of our life. Therefore, we have before our eyes the proven proof that it's possible, because here we have 70,000 years between two beings from the same planet. And let's not talk about trees that live for 3,000 years, with their incredible life report. Therefore, it is not necessary to make the reasoning of the philosopher. So much that when Eve has a sexual encounter and Cain is born, and the Adamites become, let's say, they become prolific, something that shouldn't have happened because they had to remain under numerical control on the planet.
E nasce Caino e quindi gli Adamiti diventano diventano prolifici, cosa che non doveva avvenire perché dovevano rimanere sotto il controllo numerico all'interno del Caino.
The Elohim said, here, it's in plural sense. I'll leave it in plural. Now Adam has become someone like us. That is, there is no need to wait for something else. He has already become one of us. Now, make sure he hasn't got access to the tree of life, because otherwise, this next bit is my contribution. Otherwise, he will become uncontrollable. And what is the tree of life? It was the place where they practiced the techniques to extend life. So much that Adam and Eve are being isolated because they do not have access to it. If we read the epic of Gilgamesh, and we remember that Gilgamesh was a demigod, a crossbred who wanted a long life, like that one of the gods, and to get it he does not kneel and pray to God and say, oh listen God, I'm so good at that. No, he decides to take a long trip to the place where long life was given. So if he didn't go there, he wouldn't get long life, because there it's where the techniques were practiced, and that's where Adam and Eve are kept away from, because they didn't have access to these techniques. Because if they had the same extension of life as the Elohim, then they would become uncontrollable. And Gilgamesh has to go there. There's a place that is great, which is Göbekli-Tepe, which is mentioned in the Bible. Göbekli-Tepe started to be dug out about 15-20 years ago. But it is a place that was abandoned, and the one that has abandoned it covered it with dirt. That is, before leaving it behind, they had hidden it. I suspect that these things took place there because it is within the territory of the biblical Elohim. Exactly. So all the narrations, that's why I said before the Bible is fascinating. Because it is precise regarding what it tells here. That is, the fact that they were kept away from the place where certain techniques were practiced. Whoever wanted to have access to the techniques had to go there. Not that I had to pray to God to get a long life, okay?
Riferendomi alla lunga vita che diceva 30-35.000 anni, un po' spaventare, no? Fare un sorriso. In realtà c'è una diatriba, diciamo, tra i linguisti che studiano i testi sumeri, per venisse a conoscenza. Il SAR non si sa esattamente quanto valesse. Può essere che fosse 10 volte tanto, ovvero si narra che il primo che è sceso qua di loro era sulla nave che se ne andava, ma erano passati 450.000 anni. Sto parlando di enti
allora,
300.
Certo. Se si ha accesso alle tecniche,
If you have access to the techniques that maintain chromosomes young, acting on telomeres, you can do whatever you want. When the chromosomes are made, a whole series of, they are duplicated, etc., etc. They lose bits and pieces, they age, and therefore we age. If the pieces are always held together, the chromosomes do not age and the body does not age.
quello che si sta, non diciamo scoprendo una parola grossa, che si sta cominciando a ipotizzare è che loro abbia una
That which is being, now I say, beginning to discover about what is beginning to be hypothesized is that they know an essential function of gold. And what were they looking for?
Adesso si stanno sperimentando, per esempio, l'utilizzo.
They have begun to experiment with the use of gold in chemotherapy because it seems that it facilitates certain drugs to penetrate certain areas of the cells. That is, gold in stem cells has a function. It must have a lot of functions that we cannot even begin to imagine. That we still can't imagine, but we will get there. Perhaps they already knew, and for that reason, if it's like that, it's all possible. The important thing is, and this is fundamental, keeping the mind open to possibilities. Because if one closes and says, I do not want to talk about this, no. If we have an open mind, perhaps we will arrive to things that we would never reach if we closed our minds. Never. This is the secret of intelligent people. The others are the dogmatic ones.
Perché è pericoloso. D'altra parte, sì, esatto. Esatto. Siamo talmente malfatti che probabilmente aveva ragione.
Abbiamo una domanda.
Esatto.
Abbiamo una domanda?
Sì.
Ciao Mauro.
Ciao.
Mauro, we have a question. Hello Mauro. Keeping on the timeline, the unit of measurement in the Genesis, in the creation with modification of the territory, it is spoken of day or days. Could we hypothesize that the unit of time, day, were their days, that is, on their planet, that perhaps for us is much more? Yes, this is possible and is used to indicate periods of time. They divided the work, just as the Bible does not speak of creation, but of the modifications that they have carried out in a certain territory. And when ending certain modifications, in some cases, the Elohim said that it was well done, and in other cases they would say otherwise. Or wait for the next day, the next period, because the work had not finished yet. It is not said that every day things would go well. In fact, he says it for man, at least at the beginning, before the improvements and so on. And therefore, they indicate periods of work that they have done to transform the territory in which they would settle, that territory in which they are going to be. So much that the study carried out and published by the Jewish Publication Society of New York write quietly that the narrative of creation is nothing other than the account of subdivisions to create order in a place that was disordered. They divide the waters and build a road that divides the waters that is above from the waters that is below. In the waters below, they intervene again and separate the water from the earth to create a place where to start cultivating. And that is how they go on. It is a continuous intervention to create order and make the area habitable in which they were going to install. One of the areas in which they were going to install themselves. Because they had more than one Gan Eden. We have the writings of what happened to these people here, to this family. But for example, in the book, the Bible does not speak of God or the False Testament. I do not remember. I have spoken of the Gan Eden, of which Homer speaks, which is the Garden of Chinon, which is exactly the same as the biblical Gan Eden. Likewise, a closed and protected enclosure in which production, he says, was continuous. In winter, while certain trees were bearing fruit, others were already collected. Wine was made from certain wine presses, and grapes were formed in certain strains. It was a place of forced productions, Antinoi, and all its people were called Alcidion by the Greeks, which means neighbors akin of the gods. And Alcidion was a direct descendant of Poseidon. And Poseidon gave Alcidion the ships that traveled without helmsmen. They knew alone the routes of the thoughts of men. They never got lost. They traveled very fast on and under the water. How was it that Homer would invent these things? Ships commanded by thought? Like the fantasy of Hephaestus, who in the Garden of Chinon had built some mechanical gods called Cani, that never would grow old, they didn't break down. They moved autonomously, and under their legs they had two slaves who'd carry it. And it was easily said that these two slaves had the thought and ability to speak, but then all the slaves have thoughts and ability to speak. They had shiny skin like gold, and the description ends with, they were in all equal to live girls.